Welcome back to StadiumRise, June 12, 2026, Toronto, Ontario, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Canada walk out onto the pitch at BMO Field and an entire nation stops breathing. This is Canada's first ever World Cup match on home soil. Not in 36 years, not in a generation, never. The Canadian men's national team has never, in the entire history of this sport in this country, played a World Cup match in front of their own people on their own ground. Until today, and the stadium where that moment happens, where that history is made, is BMO Field. A 736-seat football-specific bowl sitting on the western waterfront of Lake Ontario, with the Toronto skyline rising behind it and the cold grey water of the lake stretching to the horizon on the other side. Small by World Cup standards, the smallest venue in this entire tournament. But on June 12, 2026, it will feel like the biggest stadium on Earth. BMO Field opened in 2007. Built on the site of the old exhibition stadium, the same ground that once housed the Toronto Blue Jays and the Toronto Argonauts, at a cost of just $63 million. Designed specifically for football from the very first bolt, not converted from a multi-sport complex, not adapted from an NFL bowl. Built for football, shaped for football, breathed for football. The seating bowl wraps close to the pitch, every seat faces the action directly. And a steel canopy roof covers 3 sides of the ground, trapping noise, holding atmosphere, creating something intimate and electric that stadiums 10 times its size cannot replicate. Over the years that followed, more than $300 million was spent on renovations, a new canopy, new video boards, expanded suites, updated locker rooms, and then for the World Cup, a final $146 million investment, a completely new playing surface, 16,100 temporary seats added to the north and south ends, bringing capacity to 45,736, expanded hospitality zones, and upgraded broadcast facilities to international standards. The stadium that opened for $63 million now has over $400 million invested into its bones. FIFA renamed it Toronto Stadium for the duration of the tournament. The BMO branding disappears for 6 weeks. But nobody in Canada calls it anything except BMO Field. This building has a name. This building has a soul. 6 matches total here during World Cup 2026, 5 group stage games including Canada's 3 group matches, and a round of 32 on July 2nd. But none of those 6 nights carries the weight of today. Not one. Canada versus Bosnia and Herzegovina. Group B, June 12, 2026. The moment Canadian football has waited its entire existence to experience, the story of how Canada arrived here is not a simple one. For most of football's modern history, Canada was invisible on the world stage. They qualified for the 1986 World Cup in Mexico, their only previous appearance, and lost all 3 group games without scoring a single goal. Then nothing. 36 years of absence. 36 years of watching from the outside while the rest of the world played at football's greatest tournament. Then came the rebuild. Canadian players began moving to the biggest clubs in Europe. Alphonso Davies, born in a Ghanaian refugee camp, raised in Edmonton, Alberta, became a Champions League winner at Bayern Munich and one of the fastest players on the planet. Jonathan David developed into one of the most lethal strikers in League One. Tajon Buchanan, Milan Borjan, Alistair Johnston, a generation of Canadian footballers who were genuinely world-class, not just good by Canadian standards. And in January 2022, under coach John Herdman, Canada qualified for the World Cup for the first time in 36 years. The country wept. BMO Field was packed with supporters who had waited their entire adult lives for that night. The city did not sleep. Qatar 2022 was their first taste of a World Cup, and they lost all 3 group games, just like in 1986. But they were competitive. They were dangerous. Against Belgium in the opening match, they should have scored. They had moments. They had presence. And they came home with the knowledge that something real had been built. Now it is 2026. Canada are co-hosts. They have home soil advantage for the first time in their football history. Jesse Marsh has taken the coaching reins and built on Herdman's foundations. The squad has experience now. They have Alphonso Davies at the peak of his powers. They have Jonathan David, who finished as top scorer in League One, leading the attack. They have a nation of 40 million people completely, utterly, emotionally invested in what happens on this pitch over the next 6 weeks. Bosnia and Herzegovina are the first test. A nation of just 3.2 million people with a football culture fierce and proud beyond its size. Edin Dzeko, their legendary striker, has retired, but the squad that qualified for 2026 is young, hungry, and determined to make their own mark on a first World Cup appearance since 2014. But today is not about Bosnia. Not really. Today is about Canada. About a country that built this stadium before they had a World Cup to fill it. About a fan base that has waited their whole lives for this moment. About 45,736 people in red and white on the shores of Lake Ontario who will make a noise so disproportionate to the building size that players will remember it for the rest of their lives. The smallest stadium in this tournament, the loudest crowd per seat, almost certainly, and the most emotionally charged match of the entire opening round, not because of the football history between these teams, but because of what this moment means to an entire country that has never experienced anything like it before, Canada are home. The World Cup is here, and BMO Field, that grew from $63 million and a dream into this, is ready. This is the night Canadian football becomes something different, something real, something that cannot be taken back. If you enjoyed this, like, subscribe, and hit the bell. See you next week.